I wholeheartedly hope that this level of passion both for the medium of games and art outside of it, interlinking them in a single work, will become the standard and not an exception in the future. Well, that was fast. Pentiment is a Renaissance them-up game developed by Obsidian Entertainment and released in November 2022. Just looking at this video, I bet you can tell why I gravitated towards this game, that being the entire presentation of it being stylized after medieval illuminations and early print woodcuts, depending on how old the character is. Look at this dude. He's so old that bits of ink just crusted off him. Amazing. And the text font of each character depends on the protagonist's perspective on them, and the speed at which the pen strokes are filled out represents their tempo of speech. That's not just an incredibly cute detail, that's really impressive when you consider the sheer amount of work that had to go into the animations. Though, let's be honest, if it was just the presentation that was a standout, I would not be making a video on it. There's a reason why I never made a video on Obra Dinn. So, what's the game about? The year is 1518. Andreas Mahler is a journeyman artist, perfecting his craft by working as an illuminator for the Kiersis Abbey, just a stone's throw away from a small town of Tassing in Bavaria. As all artists, Andreas is a peculiar man, the kind of guy that gives all his feelings and instincts the faces of historical figures in his dreams. Lodging at a peasant family's house and filling out pages of books along with monks of the abbey, he is dragging his feet on finishing his masterpiece and returning home to Nuremberg. After all, to become a master of the craft and be accepted by the guild, he needs to marry. And while betrothed to a lady, he has never seen her in his life outside of a picture that his brother drew. In the so-called meantime, a local lord and patron of the abbey arrived, stirred some ruckus by trying to discuss Martin Luther's thesis, and was promptly found with a knife under his ribs. And then the blame gets pinned on Piero, Andreas' friend and teacher, so he needs to find out who the true culprit is before the goddamn authorities arrive. Gameplay-wise, this is an adventure game. You get some choice of Andreas' past life events that influence your dialogue options, like what he did at university before dropping out. But primarily, you move from place to place and talk to people to figure things out. There are more leads than time, so you need to think of what is the most efficient path to the truth, lest you find yourself blaming someone because they're rude. And you need to make a choice because, well, a noble died. A head has to roll, no matter how nonsensical or unjust that is. So really, this is just like Pathologic. There, it's been too long since I reminded everyone in the audience they should play that game. One part that really shines here is the game's approach to persuasion and dialogue checks. There is no dice roll or skill check. It's just a simple question of, does this character like and trust you enough to do what you're asking? Modified by all the interactions you had so far. And there is no backpedaling to say, wait, hold up, I need to get back to you with this once you like me enough. The check always catches you by surprise. It's very telltale, but if the game says that Clementine will remember this, it will come up. It's not just putting a veil of depth on you only to drop a rock on that character before the next interaction even happens. Lovely stuff. The one thing I don't like in the presentation quite as much is the journal. Tassing is so interconnected and tight-knit that I don't think separating the different plot threads into separate entries does it any good. The game is short, I beat it in 15 hours, but I think that if I left it alone for a week and came back, it would frustrate me. The plot structure would lend itself to something like, say, a thought map. Okay, I'm not gonna mention Pathologic again, I swear. But aside from getting the old windmill churning in your head and connecting the dots between people, there are also some simple minigames to convey the actions taken by Andreas. Helping a local smith keep the horseshoe steady, or cutting out cookies, or spooling wool. But honestly, I have 2 days before my good friend stands trial for murder. Do I really want to spend half of the day spinning yarn with a bunch of housewives? Yes, I'd love that. See, as with any good story, the bit-by-bit events are just half of the recipe. The real spice comes from the choice of setting and how it is portrayed, somewhat in the background. I've always been a fan of historical settings, despite getting absolutely abysmal grades on the subject back in school. I'm a huge fan of the concept of living history, understanding how people lived, what they ate, how they celebrated, and how, ultimately, we didn't change all that much despite the centuries separating me from them. And Pentiment delivers on that in spades. While this is fully a work of fiction, there is just something magical in how it portrays a time and culture that is so far, yet so close. The 16th century is a turbulent time. It's not just some nebulous era, but also the start of Reformation, and printing presses become more and more commonplace. The art that Andreas works on and the religious institution that employs him are both being pushed out, yet his closest friend in all of Tassing is the owner of a print shop, as they both bond over writing and art, even as it takes different forms. But despite these huge events, the story's scope is relatively minuscule in size. The new is built atop the old, just like Tassing itself is littered with ruins of old Roman architecture. But what truly matters in the moment is the people themselves. Working in the fields, printing books, baking. You can break bread and spend dinner with every single household in the game, and it's just so pleasant.
Agnus revenit oves, Christus innocens patri.
Catholicism is a constant element in the dialogues, being inseparable from the culture itself. And if that makes you turn up your nose, trust me, I had my fedora phase growing up and I am still a faithless heathen that is a constant source of ire for my godfather, who just so happens to be a priest. But even with that, having the religious part of culture acknowledged and discussed this widely felt nice. Because no matter how much I may disagree with that fact, this was a core element of me growing up and shaping my personality. I sure wish my memories of this part of my culture were more "it's an unchristian thing to gossip" and less "why the fuck did you make the cross sign with your left hand?" And in Pentiment, the faith itself is not the problem. By far and large, it keeps people honest and trying to do their best for others. I came across a monk singing in the halls of a church and I just couldn't help but think, yeah, this is a thing of beauty. Of course people hold it dear in their hearts. But once political power becomes entangled with it, once a personal understanding of faith bears the risk of death and persecution, once dogma becomes a justification for greed and injustice, things go to shit. The one thing I found kinda funny is how the game has an extensive glossary on characters and concepts. If you see an underlined name or idea, you can hit a button and get a quick explanation or portrait to get you on track. I felt it's a bit overindulgent, like really, do people not know who Thomas Aquinas was? But then I remembered that I thought American TV preachers are a purely fictional thing until I spoke to some real people from the US. My perspective can be somewhat tainted, considering there was a convent I passed by daily on my route to university, and I even visited it regularly because I taught one of the monks English for several years. So you know what, yeah, this glossary and a quick access to it is a great solution for anyone outside of that cultural context, without it feeling like the characters don't understand the world they live in. Even when building on reality, you gotta have world building. There is only one point of detraction I have against this game, and that's the fact that one plotline bugged out on me. I had a vital clue show itself to me visually, then it cut to main gameplay and none of the characters in the dialogue acknowledged that there was any change. And in a game where investigation is the main point and way of interaction, this is pretty bad. Hopefully it was fixed in the time between me playing it and you watching this video. I pondered about doing a spoilery section about this game for those in the know, discussing the events past the first act of the game, but I think there would be no point. This is ultimately a game of discovery, both in its murder mystery narrative and in learning about the characters. Anything I could say to people who beat the game is self-evident to them already. If you want a deeper dive after playing the game, Josh Sawyer, the narrative director, talked extensively about the books that inspired this tale. I will link the list in the description, though I would advise to not look at it before finishing the game for yourself. Before this game came out, it got a lot of press comparing it to Disco Elysium. And on one hand, I get it. This is an investigation, with no combat taking place in it at all, and heavy emphasis on characters and a very reactive world, with choices you make echoing hours later. But at the same time, no. I think the comparison does more harm than good, as the two titles are too unique to warrant it. The detective and Andreas are too different as people, the tone of the tales at stark contrast from each other. But the one thing uniting them is this: hey, game devs, you want to make non-violent games with a form of player expression other than combat? This is how you do it! Not by making the story a thing that already happened and gracefully handing the players pieces of it. Agency has so many forms other than stabbing people. Why is this lesson forgotten despite being learned several times in the medium's short history? This ended up being a shorter video than I thought, but I think that's pretty apt. This is not a tale of all-encompassing mysticism or a rabbit hole of symbolism so infinite that it wakes me up screaming late at night. It's a story about people and how, no matter how hard we paint over our mistakes and past failures, they do inevitably come back to us. Pentimento is a term that means regret after all, and it refers to corrections made to a painting mid-process visible on the final piece. And history is such a canvas painted on with millions of brushes. To the point where my biggest takeaway from playing this game are personal ruminations on my own place in it, which don't make for a good review or analysis, as I don't think you came here for my autobiography, which is a roundabout way of saying I truly believe this is a special game, but not in a way I can convey to you other than by telling you to just play it for yourself. A cop-out, I know. But what is the art of talking about the work of others if not a series of simplifications? Be it drawing a sketch of people preparing for winter or making a video on a game. In every age, in every place, the deeds of men remain the same. Well, that's the first video of 2023. In the last video I said I don't know if Signalis or Pentiment will be my game of the year. I still don't. They both are. The statuettes are imaginary, it costs me nothing to love them both. As any creator, I am a vain creature, and I would sincerely appreciate it if you would check out my past videos or share this one far and wide if you liked it. This crude representation of a video essay was made possible thanks to my Patreon supporters, now visible on the screen. Warm, heartfelt thanks to the 4 new ones in the fold: Scrungolio, Meatbells, Grog BB3, and Phil Barrott. Thank you, the energy this trust gives me will fuel me for the rest of the year. Next project is in the works, I'll see you there.